RF here from Country Lunch on WOOL 91.5 FM. Let's get back with part three of our interview, January 5th, with Paleo Mountain Man and Budcat 7.
It just shows the amount of time people were in the area and the culture that they had. And if you could have a culture that lasts thousands of years, then it disappears. I mean, where did they all go? And how long ago did they disappear? And I guess the common thinking is 10 to 12,000 years ago, people disappeared off this continent because of maybe a comet strike, flooding from the ice age, the
Some
glaciers.
sort of catastrophe or cataclysm. As I recount in my videos, like in the book, Charles D. Mann's book, 1491, he had told us about mainstream research that deals with cataclysms, catastrophes going on in the Americas, especially here on the East Coast, is somewhere between 1200 and 1300 AD. That's just one of the catastrophes. So.
Yeah, and I'm talking even farther back, up to 12 to 15,000 years ago.
It was an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
Randall Carlson goes over that in his research. It's just there was many catastrophes, but
then people would come back and they'd probably visit the same sites over and over again, even though 1,000 years ago people were visiting it, and they stopped for 1,000 years, and people came back because it is a special site, and there is special stone
up until
there.
the American Indians, because the American Indians did not engage in any of this sort of stone or rock worship cultural thing. So
it's funny because they don't say they do. They're not saying anything about it. As far as I can't get any answers about it. They won't say they know about it or
they don't know about it. That the mainstream academia has been interviewing these people since day one, and none of them ever suggested that they were the originators of any of these.
Oh yeah, no, they're talking 10,000 years.
It was the people before them, and there's very little known about these people. Of course, they ignored or omitted a lot of the research evidence for these people. So
we have a lot of evidence in stone of that time period before the Abenaki got their name and their lifestyle together. Pre 10,000, 12,000, 15,000, and how long before that I don't know, but I found some very, very primitive tools along with some not as primitive looking tools.
Probably a lot further back than we can possibly imagine. This whole story about the Americas being the New World, as we know, especially in light of the current research, is a bunch of baloney.
Yeah, I don't go for that either. I mean,
it's you can New World.
You can travel both directions, and there's a lot of the Native American in the country are related to the Asian populations, and on the East Coast there isn't that. Related more to the Western Europeans, like the Northeast and Northeast Canada. There's people that have Western European, and I'm not talking recent. I'm talking thousands of years ago, influences. And there must have been ships going back and forth and people traveling back and forth, and we lost so much of that because of the time periods involved. And that's what we're talking about, time periods that are so ancient that maybe there were thousands of years in between where there wasn't much happening, and people just forgot about these people.
I agree with that.
And then there's things that sort of thread through it, There's like the serpent threads through cultures around the world, and we find it up here. The serpent cultures, and that was a big thing back then. Was worshiping the serpent. Everyone did it around the world, and this was part of that. So there was a worldwide culture that touched Vermont.
Some of the native cultures carried that on for the Algonquins, for example. Mm-hmm. One of their main deities is the horned serpent.
The
and
Algonquins are a strange
people
little
have
people.
written books about it, where this horned serpent of the Algonquin is very similar to the Norse
Mm-hmm.
sacred serpent, horned serpent. So that, the serpent spiritual image is just worldwide when you go back further in time.
It's so strong right here in the ridge tops of New England. It was here as a religion and as a
every wall is a
cohesiveness.
snake, folks. That's just hands down. Whatever wall you're looking at in the Northeast,
That's right.
It's a serpent or a snake.
That's right.
Hands down.
That's right. And there are a lot of farmers' walls, and you can see them as you're driving here to Bellows Falls from Springfield. You can see the farmers' walls, and they're totally different. They're more geometric. They're built differently, and there's not as many of them. There's a few of them. There's not a whole lot of them.
Squared, but leveled,
yeah.
And don't forget, some of the farmers modified the stone walls that were there already. So they added to them, maybe with more fieldstone. They leveled them out. They made
you know what I find too, Dave, is a lot of the farmers left the original stone walls the way they were, or most of them.
Yeah.
They tended not to have to move them around because they were in areas that were up on the highest part of the ridges and things like that, and you didn't have to move them.
They didn't want to. They probably felt that they didn't have to do anything.
They weren't in anyone's way because they were way up in the mountains on the ridges. And you don't find the stone walls in the valleys down by the river. You don't find any of that construction. You don't find the chambers, the megaliths, the cairns. You find them up higher, 900 feet and up, above the rivers.
Yeah.
And the rivers are a few hundred feet above sea level. So you're talking 1,400 feet above sea level, you start to see these things. And that's another thing, too. That's when you see them, at that altitude. And that tells you their antiquity also, I think. Because everything below that was probably flooded or different back then.
You don't want to be around those areas because they're unpredictable and unreliable in those things. And, we find the majority of the stone walls in the Northeast in the mountainous regions anyway, right?
Oh, yeah. And for no reason. They're just meandering through the woods, a lot of them. They've been there for so long that there's no rhyme or reason for them to be there, no memory of them. So they just, they're just there. And how can why would a farmer build walls that have no entrance ways, no exit ways? Why would they build walls that have no ends on them, just straight north-south walls, with no ends? That's not marking a field off.
It's a wall in the middle of nowhere for no rhyme or reason.
With no ends, yeah. It's just a line. It
doesn't contain anything. It doesn't keep anything out.
And it's built so well that you can tap your finger on it and it rings. Think of that. It's built, and they're still standing. They're still standing.
You can't remove a stone.
You can't
remove a stone.
The top layer of stones you can remove. All the other stones are packed in tightly. And you find woven through these walls, just like at Mallory, quartz stones every so often throughout the wall. It's like it's energizing the stones.
And ever so often, these message boards that are in the middle of nowhere in the wall, right? Like on Mount Ephraim, like at the lower part of your property, right? You follow the wall. It's just sort of plain, it's ordinary, and then you come up to this, complete, total mosaic artwork form that's in front of you, and it has all sorts of information in it.
And you can't help to think you're reading a story. They're telling you a story. Story walls.
Exactly.
That's a good way to call them, story walls. You just have to learn how to read it. And I think it's an intuitive way of reading it. You read it intuitively. What's that make you think of when you see that? Well, that spiral looks like a serpent or a galaxy or, this or that. But it's an intuitive thing, I think.
I think some of it is that way, but I think some of it actually has specific information in it. Very specific information.
Yeah, you can see that too.
you can see that by the
Numbered
clusters
stones,
of stones and the types of
how they're numbered and
flat
up and
stones
down,
that are
left and
built
right.
into it.
Yeah. If I were
You
smarter,
know,
I'd
so
probably be able to read it. I have to
yeah,
look at it
me
all, and
too.
it
I
looks
don't
like a
think I'm
pretty
that
picture,
smart.
you know.
I'm not smart as people who lived 10,000 years ago. So
Well, I know there is language in the walls. I know there is an energy there that's more than just the combination of stones. I know there's a reason they did it, and I'm getting
no
closer
doubt.
to it the more, I talk about it with other people like yourself, and the more we think about these things, the closer we're getting to the story. They wanted us to know the story. That's why they left all these examples. They wanted us to read it, so it can't be that difficult. Just sort of get into their mind. Um,
Yeah, that's what you would have to do. You would have to be like a detective and sort of, live like they, and that's one of the reasons why I went to live among the stone walls. I was there 24/7 every day looking at them, and that was one of the reasons that I went there, because I think it takes a great deal of contemplation, to get, soak in all the information there. So,
and I
I
think
often recommend to the people on my channel, if you do have stone walls in your area, go out and take another look at them. Just sit there and look at them. Just look at them for a while, and you're going to start to see things in there that you never maybe noticed before, but you just walk past them, like you said.
you know what's a good thing to look for is stones that don't look like they were just picked up off the ground but shaped a little different. And you may find stone tools in the walls, like stone hammers, things that fit in your hand that are hammers, because that's how I recognized that they were that old. I started finding stone tools built into the walls, and I found
Yeah, Dennis.
they were
Dennis found a bunch of stuff.
resourced, a lot of these stones. I think the walls are even made from older stones. That's what it looks like to me in some places, because some of the stones in the walls look like old stone tools from another age.
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely. There's stone tools in there, effigy stones, carved effigy stones, as you know. And that's all part of decorating the wall. These people, being highly intelligent and artistic as they were, they added different. Remember in Mallory when I was showing some of the walls down there, and there's a beautiful piece of orange quartz, and then a little bit down there was a piece of white quartz, and they were definitely consciously, intentionally.
it all had a
wall.
deeper meaning than just a stone on a stone.
Right.
They geoformed the land for a reason. They loved the earth, and they made it better. They made it a better place.
And of course, for their agricultural practices as well, because these people were heavily into agriculture. You can't listen to mainstream; they're always wrong. And they, this whole hunter-gatherer thing is disappearing from the lexicon.
There's a guy in Georgia, Dave, that has some corn that was found in a cave or a mound, but they're twice as big as the corn stalks you find.
Right.
It was huge. You should have seen it, and it's ancient corn.
Right, just like I recounted in one of the last videos that I did on the Giants, where they had found this container filled with corn, like a peck of corn, which would be 2 dry gallons of corn, but the kernels were gigantic.
Right. Well, I saw the stalks. They're huge.
Kernels.
And just like the people back then, they were bigger. And the animals.
Yeah.
Everything was bigger back then. But these stone walls ran from back then up through history, but a lot of the construction we're talking about came from right out of the Pleistocene, I think, because of the images.
I think you're right. I think it came from the Pleistocene. I think these people survived through whatever major cataclysm.
And they were trying to tell their story. They were a sophisticated people, turned to stone, pretty much.
Right.
And then they disappeared.
Been more advanced. They could have been much more advanced people before that even occurred. And they were rendered, cavemen-like or whatever. And that's when
they knew about animals that lived on different continents. That's how much they knew.
And they knew about the animals that lived back there in the Pleistocene, which, by
But
our standards today, by our current gravity and the way animals are
when you
today,
have a seafaring
we would have
culture,
considered them monsters.
information travels. Um, Seafarers take things with them. They bring things. They bring stories. It happened back then, just like it did in the last few centuries, where the islanders would see a strange ship come by, and the cultures would be so different, but they had things in common, but there were a lot of differences. Um, I think there were seafaring cultures in the times we're talking about, and they traded ideas and information. That's why you can find
And goods. And
images
goods.
here in Vermont that you'll find over in ancient Turkey. The same type of image, like the sitting vulture, the serpent image. Well, why don't we just talk serpents, because that ran through.
Yeah. It's a common theme among many, many cultures.
You can find out more information about walls by going to YouTube and searching for Paleo Mountain Man or Budcat 7.